Welcome back. Today in the workshop we're going to put the cladding on for the electrics on this wall. But first of all, here's the jingle. As you can see, we've finished cladding the wall. It's looking really quite nice and beautiful, which is making a really nice space to be in, to be honest. You can see I've taken the cladding round the corner, but I've not yet put cladding on this part of the wall. Simple reason for that is the next project is we're building the bookcase for the back, and what I thought would be easier, we'll build the bookcase, we'll install the bookcase, and then I'll clad up to the bookcase. But yeah, we're in a pretty good shape. So today I want to put the capping on here that's going to take these back boxes. Remember the design exactly as this side here. So this is a cladding I'm talking about, and as you can see, the power outlets are inlet into that cladding. So that's what we're going to build. This is our material. It's pine again. It's a nominal 144 millimeters in width and it's 18 millimeters thick. The plan for today is we'll cut the capping to length. We'll mitre around this corner here using the mitre gauge on the Kapex. It would be good to try that, see how that works out. We'll work out exactly where you want the sockets, probably one here and one here is my thinking, but we'll have a quick look at that, and then we'll put the holes in the capping using the Festool MFS system that we reviewed the other day. We'll then put the chamfers on using the CMS router table, and then we will just attach that to there. At that point the sparky can come back in and he can then wire in the outlets for us. And he's also going to drop the sockets out of this back panel and just mount them temporarily onto this back wall, and that's so I've got some power in the bookcase for things like battery chargers, the all important radio when I'm working in here without the video on. Let's crack on. We'll use relative dimensioning to actually size this thing up. That means rather than measuring, I'll put the thing in position and make a mark where I want to make the cuts. So the first cut I'm going to make is actually into this corner here, into this mitre. If you remember, when we reviewed the Kapex saw here, we actually looked at this angle finder, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to actually use this to see how well it works. The idea goes that we position this to the angle on the wall we want to find, we lock it in, and then we use that on the Kapex to actually cut the angle that we need. So that's now got the angle set into that corner on the mitre. So half of this angle, i.e. the dotted line here, should be where the cut goes. I can then use the angle finder, resting it on the bed, and moving this into position until I get that angle lined up, which is going to be there, and lock that in. So now when I make that cut, that should give me exactly half of this angle. With that cut made, I can now offer this up, put it hard into that corner, and just take a measurement of where I want to cut this, which is going to be round about there for no other reason than I like it. And now I can cut this to length. Good. I'll now use the offcut to make this angle here, and I will use the same gauge that we had before. I've not reset this, this is still locked in, to give me the angle. All things being equal, that should now give me quite a nice mitre. And surprisingly enough, it does. Good job. So with that cut to length and our angles cut, I now want to make the holes for these back boxes. Just going to offer this up once again. And I think I want to put one back box round about here, and I'll put the other back box round about here. There's nothing critical about those measurements, it's just what look nice, and all I've done, I just did it aesthetically on the wall so it looked like an even spacing. Just measuring those two marks now to see how that worked out for us. This one came in at 35 centimetres from the inside of the mitre. This one came in at 36 centimetres from the edge of the cut. So we'll make them both 36, that'll just make it all nice and equal. So you need to be 36. And I'll just scribe a line across, 36 there. .36 there. We now need to set up the MFS. The way that the MFS works is via a copying ring and obviously the router bit itself. The copying ring sits inside the router and it runs around the inside edge of the MFS template, and that's the thing that guides us into the cut. The router bit, and this is a 6.5mm router bit, sits inside the router and is in the centre of that copying ring. So you can see that the outside edge of the copying ring is running around the template, and the bit is cutting some ways away from the edge of my template. And in fact, it's 30mm, because that's the 30mm copying ring, minus 6.5mm, because that's a 6.5mm cut. So that distance there I have to add to the size of the hole that I want to cut. The size of hole I want to cut is the one that allows this electrical back box to sit flush inside the capping for our electrics. This box is 72mm by 133mm. I know that my copying ring is 30mm and I know that my bit is 6.5mm. So 30 minus 6.5 is 23.5mm. So I add 23.5 to these dimensions, 23.5 and 23.5. So I need to set my template to 95.5 by 133 plus 23.5, 156.5. So I want a bit of play on this box. It's got a lip on it and I don't want this box too tight in the hole because it can tend to distort it. So we'll round these up. So 95.5 becomes 96, 156.5 becomes 157. So we'll set our template to 96 by 157 millimeters. So 96 is there. And 157 is there. With the template set up, the final thing is just to work out the positioning on the board. I already know I've got my centre lines marked here and here for the distance left to right. I just need to find the centre of the board for my distance up and down. And then I can just position this in the centre of that cross and we are good to go. We know we're working with a 144mm board, so I can set this to 72mm or thereabouts. 72, just check myself. And now I can just mark this accordingly. I now find the centre point on my scale. We know that this distance here is 157, so half of 157 is 78 and a half. So I can now just put an indication on here, 75.8, which is there. So I can now set this one to 48 and a half, or 48, sorry, which is there. So if I line up that there and that there, and make sure I'm square to my board, that's the position where I want to put my hole. I'm pretty much ready to go. I've got everything squared up, everything's clamped down. You can see what I've done. I've got a backer board to protect my MFT table. I've taken 2 pieces of wood that are the same thickness and put those in there to allow me to clamp this flat without distorting the framework. This is square to my workpiece, and my centre lines are all lined up, so I am pretty much good to go. There you go, we have a hole cut inside our capping, and in theory this box slots directly into there, and that's pretty much it. So that seems to work, so I'll go ahead and do the other one, and then we'll come back and we'll look at putting the chamfers on the sides of this capping. That's the 2 holes now cut for our back boxes. Works out quite well. Next job is I want to put the profile on the edge of the wood, and for that I've now set up the CMS table. It's quite a long piece of wood, this, so I've also put on here the extensions from the Kapex, and that's just to give the wood some support so it's fully supported as I'm working, and that's obviously the safest way to do this. The profile we're looking for is this profile here. So it's not complicated, but can you see it's just got these 2 chamfers on that piece of material, and that's what I'm looking to recreate. These were actually done with a hand plane, because this wall on this side I built with hand tools before I adopted the power tool strategy, so I need to replicate this. In my arsenal of router bits, I have this one, 45-degree cutter, 36.5 millimeters overall. And if you look at the profile on this, it just so happens that that's a very good match for this profile that we're looking to make. And it would be, because that was a 45-degree chamfer I put on the hand plane, and that's a 45-degree cutter, so it should work out. We'll drop this in and we'll get things lined up. Taking a straight edge, I can now line up the bearing on my bit with the fences. Just lower that down. Lock the fence into position. Now I can use this piece of wood that I've made previously, this was the piece out of this corner, and I'll just use that to set the height of this bit, which is there. And now we're good to go. Just going to make a test cut on an old piece of scrap, just to make sure that that's where we need it to be. There you have it. That looks pretty good to me. So we'll go with that, I think. We'll do the main cut. Make sure we have the mitre facing down, otherwise we're going to put the profile on the wrong end. Nice. That's really nice. Wow. Do the same on the other side. Yeah, Lovely, lovely. Now just going to cut the profile onto this piece here. Again, making sure our chamfer is facing down. Mitre, sorry. That's nice, isn't it? Beautiful piece of work that is. Okay. Next job, fit it to the wall. The capping is held onto the wall with screws, and that's so we can quickly remove it should we ever need to get to the electrics. So we're just going to mark out where we're going to put the screws. We'll put one in the centre, I think, and then one towards the end, and then one equidistant to whatever that measurement comes out at. So this piece of wood is nominally 194 long, so half of 194 is roughly 97, sounds right. So I just made a little mark there at the centre so I know where my centre is, and then I want to transfer that mark, that centre point, onto the wall, so it's going to be round about there, and we'll come back to that mark in a second. We'll then come in from the end, probably 10 millimeters, probably 10 centimeters looks good, so we'll make a 10 centimeter mark there, and we'll make a 10 centimeter mark there, and then that gives me a gap of 87, so we'll make 43, I think, so 43 would be good, and then 43 from that centre is good as well. Okay, so we now roughly know where our holes are going to be. In terms of distance in from the edge, these are the screws we are going to use. So I'll just take an arbitrary measurement. I do want these countersunk a little bit, so an arbitrary measurement will give me there. Use a set square to capture that mark, and now I can just transfer that mark to those holes. Use a set square, transfer those marks down. So now we know where our holes are going to go. I'm going to come in with a 4mm bit. And we'll just drill these holes out. Now we'll countersink those holes. Remember that centre mark I made on this wall to line up to that? I now want to use that because basically what I've created is a pivot point. So I can hold my wood up, and as long as it's at the right height, I can put a piece into there, and that will allow me to pivot this up and down as I find out my levels. The height of this is going to be taken from the height of the one that's already on the wall. And in our case, that is 119. So we'll come in and we'll make a mark of 119 in line with that pivot point. Make sure it's all nice and neat and lined up. About there. And that is the height of our rail. And that's there. Make sure we're good in the corner. Make sure our profile is going to fit nicely. It doesn't get much nicer than that. And now we can fix this to the wall. Simple as. There we go. So that rail is now pretty much done. I want to give it a sand before we put the back boxes in, so I'll just tuck these cables out of the way. and we'll get the sander on and we'll just sand off these various lines that we put on here while we were laying things out. There we go. That's it. That job is that simple. So with this on, the electrician can now come back in and he can sort out the sockets, sort that out for me. And once he's sorted that out, I'll drop this final piece on exactly the same way we've already got it made, whatever it is. So you can start to see how that's going to just neatly slide into that corner there. Nice tight joints, give me that profile, and then obviously I'll cut it here, put a mitre on this corner, ready for boxing in when we come to the final bookcase build. So that's how you build a stud wall with electrics. Not complicated, but it makes a really nice backdrop, makes a nice warm feel to the workshop, and makes it a place where you really want to be, and that's important because you're going to spend a lot of time in the workshop. Next job, we're going to start the bookcase. I've nearly finished the design. The first video will be out, well, a week after this one, whatever date that will be, and we'll look at the design of the bookcase. Thanks for watching. See you next time.